Good morning, this is Tom with the Tractor Rescue Ranch. I wanted to have another story morning today. Hope everybody's having a nice morning. I first started my YouTube channel. If any of you have been around for a long time, I've talked about this in the past. I started it just with no other reason but to document what I was doing for my children and grandchildren, to have a better connection with them. And so as I'm going through this sawmill rebuilding experience, I'm having a lot of memories come up from my childhood and when my father rebuilt a sawmill and ran it. And so I just wanted to document some more of the stories of my youth when I had spent time with my father. But anyway, I talked a little bit last week about him buying the old sawmill and rebuilding it, and so today some of the memories that I've had of doing the logging I wanted to share with you. Dad went and bought an old truck. It was a Studebaker, an old Studebaker truck, and this would have been in the 1960s. And so he hauled these logs, starting out with, he hauled these logs on that old Studebaker truck. And I don't know if you guys, some of you would know what a Studebaker truck looks like. It had the hood coming out and then big fenders on the sides. And then on the sides of on those fenders, there was some blinkers on top of those fenders on the side of the truck. And one of my memories was when we would go to the mountains. Dad purchased some timber sales from the Forest Service, and when we'd go to the mountains just as a little kid, I remember as Dad was bumping down those mountain roads in that Studebaker and I was going along with him, I remember sitting out on that fender straddling that blinker and riding on that fender outside as we're going down those bumpy roads. Boy, that's something you probably wouldn't want to do in today's world. Or you could do it in today's world, but you'd probably get in trouble if somebody had seen you with kids out on the hood of the truck as you're driving down the road. You know, obviously that wasn't happening when we were going down the highway, but anyway, that was some fond memories that I've had. Dad originally had that old Studebaker truck, and he borrowed it was an N series Ford. I don't know if it was an 8N or a 9N. He had borrowed that from my grandfather, from his father, and he had that old 8N up in the mountain and using that to skid the logs. The timber cells that he bought were all beetle kill timber cells, and back in that day, I don't know, other regions might be different, but back in that day, the Forest Service put together full timber cells of just the beetle kill pine. And so the little operators like my dad were able to go get some of those cells and wouldn't have to compete with the big sawmills. But anyway, I went and visited with them in the Forest Service office, and they don't do any of that anymore. The only thing they do is as the big timber cells, and a small operator can't compete with those big mills. But anyway, I remember lots of days going up on the mountain and camping with Dad, cutting those logs and loading them on the old truck. And he had, I'm sure there's terminology for it, but he had a big tree with a cross tree slung up in it. I don't know the terminology, but a cross tree slung up in a tall tree, and the cable running through a pulley, and then the cable run out to that old N series Ford tractor. And so he would pull that cable down and hook it to a log, and then I'd take off on that old tractor and pull the log up and load it on the truck. And then Dad would pull it down and hook another log. And so back and back and forth is what my memory was of that. Lots of fun. So Dad did that for a while, and I'm not sure what precipitated. I wish I knew what year that old Studebaker truck was, but it was old at the time. In the 1960s, it was old. So Dad finally graduated up to a better truck. It was a Chevy, a 10 tandem axle, a 10-wheeler Chevy truck that he'd purchased. And so we started hauling logs with that. And I remember one time coming out of the mountains with a load of logs, and he twisted an axle off. And so we went, and the truck parked out on the road. And Dad having his Skil chainsaw there, no way to do it. So I remember him running off in the woods with that chainsaw, because he had to leave the truck on the side of the road up there in the mountains. Didn't want somebody to walk off with that expensive chainsaw. So he went and hid it out in the woods. And then we went out and started walking out of the road, and a family had come along in a VW Bug and offered to give us a ride to town. And so they stuffed us. They had their family in there and camping gear and everything, and they stuffed us in the back seat of that VW Bug and give us a ride to town. I remember being so cramped in there with kids and luggage and all that kind of stuff there, but at least there was no way to walk to town. It was too far. But anyway, after that period, Dad went and bought an old TD6 crawler tractor, an International. And so he used that for skidding logs for a lot of years, that old TD6. And so that's kind of where I got some of my love for those old Internationals. And they've got those motors that have spark plugs and a carburetor on one side and the diesel injector on the other side. And so you start the main motor on gas and then switch it to diesel. Those are such unique motors. International made a lot of them. They put them in a lot of different things, but they're just really a unique motor. Nobody even knows about them anymore unless you've been around a while. But it's the same thing. My TD9 that I have here has the same type of motor, just a little bit bigger. So we skidded logs with that TD6 for a lot of years. And I remember one year there was an early snowstorm, and that TD6, we had to leave it back in the mountains. Dad went out with a load of logs and then couldn't get back into the mountains with the truck. And so one of his brothers, my uncle, had a dune buggy, and he went and run us in there to that old TD6 in that dune buggy, and I drove it all the way out the mountains, several miles. I don't know, maybe 10 miles or something. I drove it out in that snow on that, down to where we could get it loaded onto the truck to bring it home for the winter. Those were just some really neat memories that I had from my childhood, and I wanted to document them, especially for my kids and grandkids. But if somebody else gets a little bit of pleasure from hearing these stories, yeah, please let me know, and I'll continue to tell some of these stories. Anyway, hope you have a great day today, and thanks for watching and all your support. Thanks.